Welcome to School Scene. I'm Dan Bridges, Superintendent of Naperville Community Unit School District 203, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Karen Sullivan, Superintendent of Indian Prairie School District 204. Together, Karen and I are responsible for the education of 46,000 students in 55 schools across Naperville and areas of Aurora, Bolingbrook, Lisle, Plainfield, and Woodridge. Our mutual goal is to ensure each student receives a first-class education and leaves our districts well prepared for their next phase of life, whatever that may be. One way we accomplish this goal is by making sure our students are college and career ready by aligning our curriculum with the new Illinois Learning Standards aligned to the Common Core. To kick things off, Karen and I are joined by Districts 203 and 204 Chief Academic Officers, Dr. Jennifer Hester Schalk and Kathy Pease. So, as we said at the beginning of the show, Illinois has adopted new learning standards, which are aligned to the Common Core. Tell us a little bit about what the Common Core is and what that means.
Okay. Well, the Common Core is a set of standards for both English language arts and for math. And one of the big features of the standards is that they tell us what students need to know and be able to do at specific grade levels, and they really focus on a set of defined learning progressions so that one standard in a grade level actually builds upon the next one.
And the nice thing about them is that they intertwine both writing and technology so that they're not standalones, and kids will be able to learn how to write in response to their reading, write about math, and use technology within those two content areas.
So if you think about in the past, our standards have been very large standards. It's been really hard when teachers look at them to think about what actually is it that we need students to be able to do. And the new standards are much more focused. They have a lot more clarity, and there are fewer of them. So it makes it a lot easier to build a curriculum that is college and career ready.
Okay. And that really leads into my question that I'd like you to speak to, and that is, we hear new standards, but what impact does that really have on the curriculum that we see in our schools, and what impact does that have on the instruction we see in our schools?
Well, there have really been some shifts in both the curriculum and the instruction based on the new Illinois Learning Standards. By having fewer, our concentration is to go deeper into those topics. They say a mile wide and an inch deep. Well, now we're going a lot deeper and working on the understanding of a lot of different topics. And it has shifted some of the areas that students may have gotten at an upper grade have shifted down to a lower grade because the standards are more rigorous and require some different types of instruction in order to get there.
And I think these standards really focus on helping teachers to help our students with real-life applications, real world. So one of the common things you'll hear is that students should be able to apply their learning in a non-routine way, or in a way that's out there in community and society. So they really help us with application.
Mm-hmm. Maybe something that would be helpful for some of our viewers. I know we in education, we use a lot of jargon and we use a lot of words that we understand the meaning. But maybe explain what's the difference between a standard and curriculum.
Okay. Well, I think the standards are really statements. One of the things I said before is that it really helps us know what a student is to be able to know, so that's their content, and then what they're supposed to be able to do. So that's either a skill or an action. And if you think about the learning standard, they're a set of statements. They're usually organized under a domain or some type of discipline knowledge. And then the curriculum actually contains the standards. It generally contains standards and then the associated assessments, and then usually core academic vocabulary, and then resources. And that would be a curriculum that we're obviously writing as a district. And then, of course, there's curriculum that every teacher teaches when they interpret that district written curriculum in their classroom.
So I think one thing I hear that maybe you can speak to is the Common Core is not a curriculum. The Common Core is not a curriculum that was brought in and given to us to have to follow. we in our own districts write our own curriculum,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And we count on teachers to implement that curriculum using the art of teaching, what's best for the students within their class. The standards provide us with the goal, with the end where we want students to be at the end, but the curriculum is written to tell us how to get there, and then the teachers implement that and use their instruction based on what those students need that are in front of them.
And I was in a seventh and eighth grade classrooms the other day, and one of the things that one of the teachers pulled me aside and said, this writing curriculum is really so much more than the standards. And it gives our students the ability to just really engage in writing. And it's so much more than just 3 types of writing. They're actually connecting their writing to the other disciplines, which I think is something that Kathy already spoke to.
Right.
I think Dan and I have both spoke about our support for the Common Core standards, the new Illinois Learning Standards, because they are more rigorous, and we feel that that is what our students need and that our students can achieve at those levels. But can you speak a little bit if there have been controversy about these standards? What is that all about?
Well, I think a couple of things. One is I think because the Common Core was so nationally broadcasted and talked about, that I think that it got a lot of people's attention. And then the pieces that I think are different are that parents are used to when we were taught, what do you need to know? And then as you grew older and you figured out how to do it and how to put it all together. The standards now really look at what do you need to know and then how do you apply it. And I think that's a little different from where education had been in the last 10 to 20 years. So I think that shift into adding that piece of what do students need to know how to do is that added piece that I think is something that's a little bit different for people and a little bit harder to understand.
And I think, Dan asked the question about the difference between the standards and the curriculum. And I think that sometimes there's an assumption out there that the standards and the curriculum are the same thing, and then there's a fear that generates from that. And the fear is that all kids in all districts across the United States will be having the very same curriculum. When in fact, our states get to interpret those standards, and then the local districts get to interpret those too, and then we get to apply them in a way that makes sense for our specific communities.
The shift in curriculum in our districts to ensure that we have a curriculum aligned to the new Illinois Learning Standards by which our students will be measured, and we as school districts also, took a lot of work, I know, in both of our districts. How have we supported teachers to ensure that they're prepared to implement new curriculum as we move down the road?
Well, our teachers have really grasped onto the process of implementing the new curriculum, and we use a lot of professional development, and one of our biggest keys to our implementation has been our professional learning communities. Teachers talking to teachers about the instruction and unpacking the standards and understanding what they mean, and then talking with each other about what resources to use and how to instruct in those areas.
And I would have to say for District 203, it's very similar. The professional learning has been critically important to our success, and I feel that the teachers are really studying and understanding the standards at a deep level, and then they're also really tying their assessments to those standards so that they can really look at how students are doing and then make those instructional shifts and decisions.
How about support for parents? What advice? Curriculum has changed. You both talked about early. The new standards are much more rigorous, which means our curriculum has to be a little bit more intense to ensure that we're raising students at that level of rigor. How can parents at home, who are seeing new things, even we bring in things like technology to enhance instruction. How can parents at home feel that they can be connected to their students in this type of curriculum that they're seeing now?
I think number one is engage with your school. I think probably all of our schools have very much provided parent education. I know many of our schools have brought parents in and right alongside their child or their student and have really gone through some of the curriculum and some of the content. I think that when parents have questions about, boy, I didn't learn math that way, and what should we do, that they actually go in and talk to the teachers and say, what language are you using and how can I support at home?
I think that's so important. I agree with you. Talk to your child's teacher, because the teacher can explain not only the curriculum but how your child is responding to it, and I think that's the most important thing.
We've talked about math and we've talked about English language arts standards, but there are some new science standards as well. Can you speak to those?
We do have new science standards coming, and I know that I'm sure 204 is as well, but we are all actively working with them in the curriculum process. And I would just highlight that one of the major emphasis is really bringing engineering practices into science. So we've always had that domain knowledge, with chemistry and the physical sciences and the life sciences, but it's really bringing that engineering into the standards.
And I think there's an instructional shift that goes along with that, in that we're really teaching students how to, we're asking teachers to question students in order to help them to discover the knowledge, because we all know that you can Google anything right now and get an answer to how far is the Earth from the sun, but asking, helping them to understand how to investigate and how to discover, and then how to determine if that's an answer that's appropriate or not.
Science is related to, I think, one of the things that nationally gets a lot of attention by people, that's STEM education. What is STEM education, and what are we doing in our districts to support STEM education?
Well, STEM education is really the integration of science, technology, and mathematics. And I think one of the things that is very nice about the new standards, both in math and science, is when they wrote the science, they wrote them with the math standards in mind. So, they are very much in line and support our instruction.
And we have classes that are dedicated to STEM. We have some Project Lead the Way courses that are a nice progression from middle school into high school that prepare students for those fields. And we really just try to look for opportunities to integrate that into the day, no matter what it is.
What's the most exciting change you've seen in the classrooms in the recent years?
I really think it's the engagement that's happening through teachers being able to meet students' needs better. So technology is one of those reasons that we can better engage with our students and know where they are. But I think the other thing that when you think of technology and the engagement is collaboration. So I think the degree and the amount of collaboration has really been exciting in the classroom.
And I would agree with those two things, and just add, our students are using critical thinking. I was in a first grade classroom yesterday where the students were looking at a conflict and an impact. So to hear 6-year-olds talk about a story in those terms was just very inspiring.
Just very briefly, we're running out of time here. In our next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about assessment. Just briefly, what's the connection between assessment and instruction here? Why is it so important?
Because the assessment really lets us know where our students are, and it helps us to make the decisions about where we go next.
Great. Thanks to Jen and Kathy for joining us today. And when we return, Karen and I will discuss with school district experts how state assessments have changed over the past few years.
Read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition.
Welcome back to School Scene. Joining us now is Naperville 203's Assistant Superintendent for Assessment and Analytics, Tim Wierenga, and District 204's Executive Director of Research and Assessment, Dr. Patrick Nolten. So I'm going to start first. For years, our students have taken the ISAT exam. Illinois now requires the PARCC. Why the change?
Well, back when we adopted the Common Core in 2010, it led to the need for new state assessment. And this new state assessment is now based on the Common Core, the new Illinois state standards, rather than the old Illinois state standards.
I think one difference is really the way in which students are assessed. They're assessed relative to being able to construct responses, show responses, rather than simply selecting responses. So I think the attempt is really to tap into different ways of allowing students to show knowledge, concepts, and skills.
So let's go a little bit deeper there. What makes the PARCC different than ISAT? And maybe not just in what is being assessed, how it's being assessed, but the method in which the data is collected. Talk to us a little bit about the differences between the two.
Well, we live in a new age with technology that now we can gather information quicker, and so it was put forward that the consortiums that were formed to assess the Common Core needed to be technology-based so that they could gather that information. And so now we can put forward assessment types of problems that are more interactive. Students can actually move objects around the screen, sometimes type in answers that allow us to not only see the information quicker, but also allows the students to go deeper in the types of questions they answer.
And just to piggyback with what Tim said, I think there's an acknowledgement that developmentally students are now engaged in a different way with technology, and so taking advantage of that and allowing them to show what they're able to do in that sort of way is advantageous.
The type of rigor that the Common Core engenders with the students being able to, in the curriculums that both districts have provided, as well as across the state of Illinois, allows those types of questions to be asked. So where the ISAT and the PARCC test tended to be more geared toward quicker answers, more multiple choice type answers. Now we can get more interactive answers and also maybe more extended response type answers that students can take.
I also think that there's an intent to take a look at where students are in terms of their trajectory relative to being ready for college and career, the next step, and that alignment or acknowledgement of these standards really being an indicator of where students need to be as they transition on to post-secondary as part of the opportunity here to measure early our students on that path, or the things that need to occur in advance of graduation.
So as both of you have indicated, both of our districts did the test totally online. So what kind of steps or other things did we have to do to implement to make sure it was successful?
We did a lot of work in leading up to the assessment of taking stock of what kind of technology we had, and also that our technology had the proper types of software on it in order to make these assessments work. And then when we, in District 203, we've gone to what we call the Digital Learning Initiative that allows our students at the high school right now to have their own Chromebook. We had to make sure that the Chromebook, there's an app that they can use for the PARCC assessment on that. And so we had to make sure that all those things were in place and ready for the students to take it online.
We did a lot of advanced preparation. 13-14, we participated in field testing. So that gave us a general rough familiarity with the platform, the user interface. We have amazing technology teams, an amazing assessment team, and just a lot of practice and preparation, really making sure that our wireless network had the capacity to be consistent enough to engage students in testing without interruption. A lot of staff development, a lot of professional development related to just the procedures behind carrying this out. And lastly, a lot of collaboration with the vendor and with the state of Illinois, basically the Department of Education, or ISB.
We had students who we put them online in both districts to take practice tests. And it's interesting to see that the kids were very adept at moving into this environment. I think we as adults sometimes took a little bit more time to do that, but the kids were, they moved into it and adapted to it very well.
Well, I know both our districts worked very hard to ensure that we were prepared and ready when this new assessment came. But anytime there's change can sometimes be difficult and bring some challenges. What are some challenges we faced or we think we'll continue to face as we move forward with implementing PARCC?
I think, some of the challenges just were around kind of procedurally getting people familiar with sort of the behind-the-scenes preparation and what needs to happen in advance of the actual assessment date or time. And like Tim was saying before, I think some of the hesitancy had to do with more adult concern relative to student familiarity, but like you said, just a lot of really adept kids that are familiar with navigating and using technology to move through their life, both academically and non-academically.
The assessment allows for special accommodations, some that are for students that have those actually outlined in different plans, but also some that we've just identified in classes. And so one of the challenges is getting to know our students and which types of these procedures. For instance, maybe it could be having the test be able to mask some different types of questions or answers to it, and knowing which of our students would benefit from them, and then having them practice those sorts of things on the test.
Well, one of the advantages of having an online assessment is our hope that we would get those results quickly. That hasn't quite happened this time. You want to talk a little bit about that and when we might expect to see results for our parents?
Sure. I mean, there's a process in the first year of any new assessment like this that's done broad scale that involves level setting and really identifying proficiency levels. A bit of that's, there's art and science involved in determining what's considered proficient or exceeding proficient or near proficient. And so that's not a quick process. That's a time-intensive process. And I think, that's been a large part of the delay in terms of getting this information in a timely manner.
I think what we've heard from the state of Illinois that they're hoping to be getting initial results on a broad scale. They've already released some for those folks who have taken the test online, but they're hoping to get some districts information for the high schools as early as next month, and maybe for our elementaries and junior high schools in December. Not sure when that will mean when that can be released to parents, but we're hoping soon in the next few months we'll be having that data.
But our hope is that in the future there won't be this kind of delay.
Yeah, the aspirational goal originally was that it would be released sometime before the end of the school year, which of course differs by district, but that there seems to be some conversation about trying to get it by mid-June.
I lost my question. I can't remember what I'm going to ask you.
ACT?
No. I was thinking a little bit about the state. And the state has been responsive to concerns that districts have had and talked about. And I know that there are some changes coming for the next year. What are some of the changes we anticipate with PARCC implementation for this year?
Well, it was really interesting that last year when we had the testing period set up, it was set up into two testing periods. One was called the performance-based assessment. The other one was called the end-of-year assessment. And for our schools, that provided some challenges. It meant that we had to get the computers for both districts in the hands of kids in 2 different times. That took the computers out of the instructional process during that time. And so when we gave that kind of feedback, the PARCC Consortium responded by bringing those 2 sets of assessments together into one window, and then also reducing some of the time it took, because one of the concerns is how much time it takes to take these tests.
I also think they've also made attempts to, like Tim just said, reduce just the number of units or the number of assessment sessions to try to keep it a little bit more manageable, but still providing relevant information about the standards, but shortening it.
At the high school level, we had students taking PARCC, and then in addition, the state providing the ACT. Can you talk a little bit about what the current status is with the ACT at the state level?
I mean, we know that a request for proposals has gone out and been responded to by the College Board, the producer of the SAT as well as ACT, and we're kind of in a holding pattern in terms of, finding out will the state be able to provide either one of those depending on the bids, as well as will the state just financially be able to provide for either one of those at all. So we're at a place where there's just uncertainty about that. I know people want to know. We happen to be in a position where we are willing to fund the ACT administration as a district, assuming everybody's on the same page with that, should that be the case.
I think both schools, districts have worked toward preparing our students so that whichever case it might be, our students are going to be prepared and they're going to have a successful experience. And so in that way, we're ready, but we're also hoping that those sorts of things can be finalized so our students can be scheduled and they'll know what their schedule is.
We've talked about PARCC, we've talked about ACT, but we know those are one test, right? One score. Talk a little bit more about, especially for our parents, that we don't see students by one single score. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we consider a balanced assessment system for what we do in our districts, and that balanced assessment system does look at annual accountability measures such as the ACT and the PARCC, but it also looks at the common assessments that our schools might give in order to see, like if we've got our literacy curriculum, see how our students are writing across different grades and how they're progressing and growing, and then also the classroom assessment that teachers, those are the folks that know the students, know how they're doing, and they're the ones that are closest to the action and be able to use that information to help see that our students are learning more.
Same page as far as Tim goes. I mean, we're in a place where we want multiple sources of information, and so we certainly just never really look at one data point and make a broad sweeping generalization or decision about a student using that data point.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about why it's so important to look at multiple measures.
Well, our students are sometimes they're not defined by a number, they're defined by who they are. And so the way students interact with each other and they interact with our teachers, that gives information all the time. And so certainly assessments and tests and high-level tests do, but just the information students share on a daily basis in their interactions and how they collaborate is just as important to know them as a student.
Great. Well, thanks, Tim and Patrick. Dan and I would like to thank you for being our guests and joining us on this episode of School Scene and providing a more detailed look at how our two districts ensure our students are college and career ready. Until next time, I'm Karen Sullivan. Thanks for watching.